She wants to kill babies, but she's still beautiful. You look very beautiful in that dress. You look very sexy. Look at that booty on AOC. That's my favorite big booty Latina.
I want to do a little selfie.
I love it. My favorite AOC. Nice to meet you, AOC. Look how sexy she looks in that dress.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Punching Left. I'm your host, AJ Wilms, joined here with my co-host, Mike Lauber. And wow, we love Alex Stein 99 on Twitter, someone who follows me, a big fan of the man, and he's always trolling these Congress people. Mike, what are your thoughts on him going up to AOC? This is a troll, by the way. He's not actually an AOC fan, for people who don't know.
I'm just glad to see somebody out there doing the Lord's work.
Yeah, I'm surprised she wasn't like calling for like sexual harassment charges or something like that after this.
Well, I think she is now. She seemed pretty happy about it, though. While it was happening, but you know, somebody probably afterwards told her who it was, so she probably thought it was an actual fan to begin with.
Yeah, well, her handler like tried to move her away at first, and then she's like, "Oh, it's too late, anyways," you know?
Yeah. Her handler just didn't want to make it look even worse than it already was.
Yeah, because I think she said to him like, "Oh, you want a selfie?" And she was like, "This is."
Oh, I know, that would be perfect. That would have been blasted all over social media. I guess she's lucky it didn't go that far.
Yeah, well, it's certainly funny nonetheless. But we have a lot of news to cover today, and it starts with the Alex Stein story here. So
yes,
as we have some technical difficulties, here we go. So, Mike, tell us a little bit more about what happened here.
Yeah. So after the fact, AOC, I guess, contacted Capitol Police, and then they went to go interrogate Alex Stein. So I can only imagine how that went. I would love to see video of Alex Stein getting interviewed by the police.
I was actually thinking to myself, like, what if he actually like was in court or something? Would he keep like the character up? Would he just be like, "I love AOC though. I love the big Latino booty there. You can't blame me, man. How do you guys not look at that? Like me, come on." Or I wonder if he'd be like actually serious and be like, "Hey, look, I have a First Amendment right. Let me out of here," you know?
I like to think he would stay in character just like he does at all these like city council meetings, but like the way they're treated there, he might actually be afraid he'd end up like in jail, locked up, throw away the key, like all the J6 defendants.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's not the first time this has happened with people getting thrown away and have the lock thrown away with them or whatever. So it's upsetting to see things like that happen. And AOC, I don't know if you had a slide for this later, but she was talking to a journalist, I believe, and she was saying how there were January 6 police, like the police force that were there on that day, who were allowing people in, and kind of admitted like there was some cooperation on the side of the government in allowing January 6th to have occurred.
Yeah, she kind of like had a meltdown. I don't remember if this was in an interview with a journalist or just on like her Twitter feed or something like that. It was might have been a live feed that she did. And she basically, in trying to throw like the Capitol Police under the bus for, daring to let Alex Stein talk to her in public, she mentioned that the J6, or on J6, the police unlocked the doors from the inside. So the cat's out of the bag now, even though I'm sure they'll ignore it. Yeah,
well, and to me, I think this is like both good and bad. It's good in the sense that, we are obviously seeing a government official, a congresswoman, say like, yes, there was police cooperation in this, which kind of shows like the government, it was not an entirely one-sided event. It wasn't like these people like, beat up a bunch of cops and like were punching people and killing cops and went in. It was more like, "Oh, let me open the door for you, sir." But the bad part of this is, which I think a lot of conservatives are missing the point of, AOC, the reason she was having that meltdown is because from her perspective, the entire, police system is a white supremacist system and inherently corrupt, and it needs to be purged, and they need to get out all the evil people and put in all the good progressive police, right? And this is why we're seeing purges take place in our military and police. I'm worried that this will be used as justification for getting rid of all these white supremacists and white nationalists in the police force, that they can replace all the good cops with these crazy progressive diversity hire cops.
Yeah, it's either, that's exactly what we'll get. It's either like woke progressives, or they're going to do like they've threatened to and put like therapists out there,
right,
instead of cops to respond to incidents. You're right. This probably will be used for that, or for as an excuse to crack down on other right-wing comedians or other people that are going around like trolling the left. That it's somehow it's
right.
It'll be construed as being violent somehow. Our speech is violence and their violence is speech.
Yeah, because a lot of like conservatives are like, this is awesome that AOC admitted the police were in on it. Which again, to some extent, like yes, now we are getting more valid sources or sources with more credentials behind them saying yes, the government was involved to some extent. But that's bad in a way because the government hates everyone who was involved in it. So now they're just going to say, oh, let's just fire all the current DC cops and get a bunch of like really progressive ones in. So I think that it's like a double-edged sword here. And that's exactly what AOC is going for. Of course, all of these far left-wing people want to completely uproot all the institutions we have, even to the point that like normal Democrats like Nancy Pelosi are scared of AOC because even like the current Democratic Party is like, hey, let's not take things too fast here. Like we want to destroy America, but not like we want to do it at a snail's pace as opposed to what you guys are doing in your Ferrari, racing along to the destruction of the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, the left already has their goon squad basically in the FBI. I mean, look at all this stuff with Hunter Biden. You can bet if anything like this had happened with Eric Trump or Don Jr. or anyone else in the Trump family, it would be plastered all over the news right now, and there would be endless investigations.
Yeah.
I mean, I was listening to last night brought up that it was a big deal when they found posts that Don Jr. and Eric Trump did on some hunting forum. I mean, nothing bad, nothing salacious, no pictures or anything else.
Yeah.
Like this was a major news story from a few years ago, and like I forgot all about it.
Yeah. Well, of course. And, the things that like Trump's children engaged in were obviously not that big of a deal, especially relative to like doing crack cocaine with hookers and not like a one-time thing. It wasn't like he was on a bender when he was 19 years old. We're talking like consistently throughout his life with multiple people, multiple drug dealers, multiple different nefarious products and hard drugs. I mean, it's pretty alarming if you ask me.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, we're closing in on a terabyte of this kind of video and pictures and everything else.
Yeah.
So I think they're up to about 900 gigs so far between the laptop and then what just came through this iCloud. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also like who films himself doing this kind of stuff? And like, again, like you said, it's not a one-off. It's not like he accidentally left his phone on while he was weighing the crack.
Yeah.
This is something he does on a regular basis. Like he's just like documents his day, films everything because he's not afraid of there being any repercussions. He's not afraid of getting caught or arrested or prosecuted or anything else. He's violated multiple federal laws, including, buying a gun while he's addicted to drugs, moving a hooker across state lines, which apparently makes it worse.
Yeah.
Not to mention the crack and everything else.
Yeah.
And who knows about the underage stuff. I mean, we'll probably get into this a lot more on our other show this weekend because there's a lot of things we'd like to talk about that will get thrown off YouTube as we mention them here.
Right. Yeah. And of course, things are developing every day with that story, and they're going to keep developing every day because he has such a crazy life. And yeah, so I mean, just insane all the stuff that he got into. And someone I spoke to in real life, a family member of mine, they had like a theory on why he films everything because I brought up, we talked about this last show, how Hunter Biden apparently referred to Joe Biden as, what was it, Pedo Peter or Pedo the or whatever.
Yeah, Pedo Pete.
Peter, yeah. It's just so weird, right? Because this is Joe Biden's alias that he goes by, if I'm not mistaken, where sometimes he goes by a fake name, which is Peter, and apparently his son and presumably others refer to him as Pedo Peter. So, we were speculating maybe there was some weird kind of stuff that happened in that family, maybe to Hunter, and maybe that would explain, this is the family member's theory, why he films everything. Because what if, during his childhood, there was something terrible that happened and it was all filmed or something? Because these DC pedos are pretty creepy, and that may have just totally destroyed his brain, and that's what led to him being like this. I think it has a lot to do with how Joe Biden raised him and his environment growing up, that he's become what he is today, Hunter Biden.
Oh, no doubt. And it sounds like Joe Biden played a part in that too, that it was, we know there was abuse going on. Everybody's seen like the entries from the Ashley Biden journal. And I mean, it sounds like it was a bad situation all the way around.
Yeah.
But I mean, that still doesn't excuse his behavior. You don't,
right.
I mean, that's not a reason to keep buying crack and banging hookers.
Yeah, it's to me it more reflects on like Joe Biden, because he could just be like, oh well, some kids just do crack, not my fault. It's like, well, no, you guys probably did something wrong. Like, not the average person doesn't grow up doing crack. Like, something happened to this kid, whether he's growing up or later in life or whatever. It's probably a result of bad parenting. And like you said, it's not an excuse, but just a recognition that like the president is a bad father. And it's sad to say that, people said Trump was a terrible dad and all this. But look at Trump's kids. They're doing fantastic today.
Yeah, exactly. The only investigations that are happening are all political. They're not based on any like crimes that happened or anything else.
Yeah. And the opposite in this case, there's no investigations happening when there's real crimes, Or when they finally do manage to do a little bit of digging into this guy, it's on like one of like the 100 charges that he actually has. They're not looking into him like with the potential child prostitution thing. They're not looking into him because of all the drugs and the guns and things. They're not looking into him with all this salacious stuff that he's been doing. It's just that he may have moved someone across state lines, a prostitute, that maybe they'll look into that part, which they're not going to do anything with anyways.
No, and actually, like, I do want to mention one other thing. Like, all the salacious stuff like takes away from a lot of the real major financial crimes,
Right.
bribery, possible embezzlement, and other things
Yeah.
that are also contained on this drive. Like, we like to focus on this stuff because, like, one, it's funny and it's really horrible. But the real problems are him trading on the Biden name, or possibly using that like selling access, or there's just going to be a story coming out now. It looks like he may have actually, his firm may have had a direct sales to a firm in China that directly benefited Joe Biden after he was president.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And people think that the U.S. is like above it all and stuff, because I watched a video just the other day about Viktor Orban. He's the prime minister or president of Hungary, and people are saying it's so corrupt because he gave a construction deal to his lifelong friend because he works in construction, and I bet he could have got a better rate from some. And I'm like, this type of corruption happens all over the world, and for some reason in America we think that the US is just immune to this, but it's absolutely not. And to suggest that it's crazy to think that Hunter Biden or Joe Biden can be doing deals with other nations that hurt American people but line their own pockets is just totally naive.
Well, and again, especially when there's a continuous record of it, that from Ukraine to China to deals with Russian oligarchs, other things. And it's also the people that Hunter had these interactions with, like, there's no prosecution on them. Like, we were targeting a lot of these Russian oligarchs taking yachts and other property a few months ago, but the guy that Hunter had the relationship with, they skip him. He got a pass.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, like the suggestion that these things never happen, it's like it's a very naive way of looking at the world. Like, America's the best. We'd never do anything wrong. And like you said, like there's some like concrete facts that we can look at that really suggest that there are things that are not beneficial to Americans happening with the deals that Hunter Biden is making that may be beneficial to himself or his family.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just Hunter. Like, there's other people in office right now whose kids that have these same kind of like deals going on, especially in Ukraine. I mean, there's Nancy Pelosi's her son, I think it's Paul Pelosi Jr., Mitt Romney's son. He was involved in Ukraine as well. And there's a whole list of them. And then the corruption through South America, other places. But they bend the rules to line their own pockets, and then they prevent investigation. I think we brought this up on here the other day, but like with these financial crimes, banks report suspicious transactions.
Right.
And until Biden was elected, Congress had access to these reports, and now they're blocked from getting direct access. I guess they have to go through and request them now. And it's because Hunter Biden and Jim Biden like set some kind of freaking record. There are over 250 reports filed on them in 1 year by various banks and financial institutions.
That's insane. And why is it always Ukraine too? Like, of all the countries you could be embezzling money through and stuff, like it couldn't be France or something. It couldn't be like Germany, like a country that actually has no real like major superpower threatening it. It's like we pick Taiwan, the number one enemy of China. We pick Ukraine, the number one enemy of Russia. Why can't we pick some countries to be, not that we should, but if we're going to have our politicians really interested in a country, it shouldn't be one that a major superpower might try to take over, because that means that we have to go to war with that superpower.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason we're so deep into Ukraine with all this corruption is when the Soviet Union fell, we basically installed a lot of their leaders from that moment to now, that we installed corrupt systems over the years, and then that was a money laundering operation.
Yeah, that's very true. So it's just a terrible coincidence, I guess, that we always pick the side of the losers. And that means we have to come in to rescue them when things go wrong, which is not good for America. Definitely not good for the U.S. getting involved in the Third World War to protect Hunter Biden's bank account.
Yeah, or really Joe Biden's. I think they're just he's just doing the dirty work. But to kind of get a little bit back on track to the Alex Stein story, there we have the Capitol Police going after a comedian, basically trying to intimidate him, where we've had months of illegal protests in front of the Supreme Court justices' homes, and the federal law enforcement not doing anything about it, unless somebody's actually trying to kill one of them, then I guess they'll step in. But local police now are trying to stop these protests using noise ordinances and other violations like that, because the local residents around them, that live around the justices have just finally had it with this continuous nonstop harassment.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad that the cops are finally trying to figure out a way to get these people off the streets. And I mean, we've discussed on the show many times before that this is clearly intimidation of a judge, which is illegal and rightfully so in America. We've obviously, free speech is important, but not when it perverts justice and you're intimidating judges so that they rule however you want them to. I mean, that's simply just mob rule. That's putting a gun to someone's head saying, "Give me your wallet," and saying, "It's just free speech." That's all it is, right? Not really, right? So I'm glad the police finally found a way to crack down on this. I don't know why they didn't just enforce the current laws. They had to go to like some weirder, like obscure ones, like you said, these city ordinances instead. But I'm glad it's getting done nonetheless.
Yeah, and I think the game that they're playing is they know if they try to enforce a federal law out there, that they may have difficulty once the case moves forward, getting the government to cooperate. So they're using local ordinances instead. Yeah, the point is, thing that kind of bothers me about this too is like at this point, like if you want to look at it from their point of view, like the damage is already done, the decision's already come out.
Right.
So why are they still trying to intimidate these justices? Is this to send a message for further rulings that if you rule against the mob on the left, that there'll be consequences and no one will come to protect you?
I think that's what it is. I think it's I think they're trying to show like the birth pains of what is to come, and they're showing these justices, look, you took away Roe versus Wade, we showed up to your house. If you repeal something else, if you allow people to have machine guns or whatever in America, we're going to do this again, but there's going to be 10 times more of us. This will become more normalized. We have training now. We've done this before. We know what we're doing. And I think it sends a message to these justices like, hey, this time I got away with my life, but they were outside my house like en masse and the police didn't do anything about it. Maybe I should be more careful next time I make a decision. I think that's what the main intention of this is.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's both about like sending a message, telling them they're not safe no matter where they go. They can't hide in their house, and that the federal government won't come to protect them.
Yeah.
But it's also to show that they're organized and that there will be repercussions in the future.
Right.
It's really sick though. And again, if this happened the other way around and we were going after them, you had conservatives protesting these justices, you can guarantee there would be arrests. If we showed up at
Ruth Bader Ginsburg's house, or who are the ones who are still alive, the ones who aren't in hell yet. I blank on their names. I only know the conservative ones.
Yeah, well, they're the important ones anyway. I mean, nobody really cares about our
I know one starts with a K, right? Carson, whatever. This makes me terrible. People are so bored right now. They're like, oh, these two idiots don't even know the names of the court justices. There's only 9. Look, I know Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and that was all I needed to know for the longest time.
Yeah. The rest of them really weren't important anyway. Who cares? Even the left doesn't like them. Doesn't care about them. I mean, they're not good enough.
Very true. Very true. I'm gonna look this up now because it's gonna annoy me. Okay, there's Sotomayor. Yeah, Sotomayor. There's Kagan.
Elena Kagan.
Right, and then there's of course, how could we forget Ketanji Brown Jackson?
Right. Oh yeah, right. I forgot. We just got a new one added to the courts. The diversity hire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, literally. So wouldn't that be? It's so weird to me that like I always thought like, isn't it kind of weird for like black people that there's a bunch of like the Democrats are always like, we want you just because you're black. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I would feel so weird taking a job if someone's like, AJ, we need you because we need a white person. Okay, so come on. I'd be like, is that really all the value I offer to the table here? Is just that I'm white?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's even what Biden said, that it was going to be a woman of color. So no men need apply. No whites need apply. Probably no Asians. I'm sure that was probably excluded too. I have no idea how
that's legal. Like, what if Trump said, yeah, it's going to be a white man, so woman off the table, black people off the table, Hispanic. I don't want any of you guys. I only am looking at white men, and all the other applications will just be immediately thrown in the trash.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hate to bring up Mitt Romney on this because I do think he's a scumbag. But remember, like when he talked about like the binders of women applicants for different White House roles, that was portrayed in the opposite light, that it was something negative, that somehow that was objectifying women.
Yeah, the binders full of women thing, that made no sense to me at all. I'm like, because I remember that scandal and people talking about it, and I'm like, he just wanted to hire a woman. Like, why is that a bad thing? I thought that was like a good progressive thing to do. Like, if anything, I was pissed. I'm like, dude, men are better than women. Why don't you hire men instead of girls? But I guess, I'm in a minority opinion there. I don't know why most people were mad though.
Yeah, well, see, it's only when our side does something like that, then it becomes a problem, and it
Right.
should. Like, like you said, you shouldn't be hiring people just based on
Yeah.
innate characteristics that don't matter. It should be, especially at an executive level. Like, I want the best person for the job. I don't care what race, gender, or whatever else they are. As long as they're sane and they're the best person for the job, that's who we should put there.
Well, yeah, and there's cases like, with overturning Roe versus Wade. There was some people laughing about it because, like, what was Roe versus Wade? It was like 8 like white men and 1 white woman or whatever that decided Roe versus Wade, and then the overturning. It was obviously, you have all these, like, black people and Amy Coney Barrett. You have like women, black people, all these different like groups, all these different minority groups that are determining to overturn it. So it kind of worked against the left because they think diversity just will automatically equal strength for their position. And maybe in a lot of times it does, but sometimes if you actually just get legitimately qualified people like Clarence Thomas, you are going to have someone who is an actual constitutionalist, even if he happens to be black, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what the left forgets. That's also why they hate people like
Yeah,
Clarence Thomas or any other, black or minority conservative, Myra Flores. They can't wait to throw her under the bus right now,
right.
um, because it breaks their narrative. And anybody like that that's articulate and good at messaging, I think, is a huge threat to them. Like
Yeah.
Byron Donaldson, he's a rep out of Florida. Like, they cannot stand that guy because he's black, articulate, and does not care. He will say what he thinks and won't go for these race-baited games.
Right. Well, and the Democrats need like minority votes because without them, they don't win elections. I
Yeah.
think in Texas, for example, like 8% of white people vote Republican, so they have to like extremely heavily rely on all non-white voters to get any seats at all in these on a state level, right, in the state legislature. So they really heavily depend on that, and even breaking just a couple percent points off of their votes there would really do a ton of damage. What was the statistic that you mentioned a few times on the show about how many Democratic votes are required from the black community to win elections?
Yeah, that if they lose, depending on the city, it's like around 5 to 6% of the black vote. All of a sudden, they can't win dog catcher.
Right. So
Like,
they need like almost 100% of like the
mhm.
black vote, and even if they lose like a few percent points, then they can't win the election. And that's why I've always said the game Republicans should be playing is not pandering to minorities like the Democrats do, because the Democrats are going to win at the pandering game every day of the week, and we
Yeah,
don't want to sacrifice our values to be these like, oh, we bow down, let's make a George Floyd statue. What we need to do is show all these minority voters that they shouldn't be voting Democrat and they should be voting for literally any other party. Imagine they can vote for the Communist Party for all we care, because then the communists and the Democrats both lose and the Republicans win the election.
yeah. Well, I think the trick is too I mean, you're right. You don't want to pander to anybody, but you show them why the same thing, the same values, the same policies that help, the white community will benefit Hispanics or blacks or whoever else, because a good economic policy and good rules benefit everybody.
Yeah.
So direct pandering doesn't help. But I think this is also what's starting to like really terrify the left, especially with Hispanics moving to vote more Republican, being more conservative. If
Yeah.
they lose a big chunk of that voting block, especially in states like Texas or Georgia, Florida, that kind of, they can't win anything then. Same
Right.
thing.
Well, I think a lot of these groups have a very strong like in-group preference, which is maybe why they don't vote. Even if they know it's better to vote for Republicans, they still refuse to. But at the end of the day, I think that people are also drawn towards like strong leaders, which is why you had so many Hispanic people relative to before. Not like it was overwhelming. I think 30% of Hispanics voted for Trump, which is obviously a pretty small minority. However, that was a lot more from previous elections because they said like this is an actual like strong leader who puts his country first, and this is someone I can depend on and I would trust like leading us into battle. Someone like Joe Biden is extremely weak and frail, someone who can't even get a sentence out. So people see that on a very like innate level or on a very natural level, and they see that that's a poor leader and that's someone I won't want to follow. So I think that's also something important to consider as well.
Agreed. I also think, the obvious pandering from the left, whether it's, Joe Biden out there calling Hispanics breakfast tacos, or,
Yeah.
the Democrat Party continuing to refer to them as Latinx, which none of them want to be,
Yeah.
want to be called.
I read something like 8% of like Latinos in America or Latinas, they actually want to be called Latinx. And then like the 92% say, I don't like it or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. They can't stand it. They think it's stupid. It's pandering. And it's also, it's not, doesn't reflect reality.
Yeah.
And I think that
Well,
is also helping Republicans, because as you're pushing them away from the Democrat Party, it helps. But social issue is
Yeah.
the other big winner with Hispanics. Like they don't agree with abortion on demand up to 9 months or all this, some of this other garbage.
Right. Well, I think too, not to sound like a liberal, but it's kind of ironic that you have these Democrats who are enforcing these cultural standards onto Latinos. Like, you have to be called Latinx. That's what it's called, buddy. And they're
Yeah.
like, mind your own business. Like, let us call each other what we want. You know what I mean? And, it's kind of funny. It's like, well, if you guys are going to try to force them to assimilate, why don't you do like other things? Speaking of our Hispanic friends, we have one here on screen, illegal immigrant from presumably Mexico. Guatemala, okay. Same thing to me, honestly.
Yeah.
People get mad because I call Puerto Ricans Mexicans. Is that racist? I don't think so. Mexican isn't a race, but that's okay. The man who raped this 10-year-old girl was an illegal immigrant. And this was a story that was pushed in everyone's face about why abortion is necessary in America. I have a controversial take on this, but Mike, I'll let you say your less controversial things first to lead us into this. What are your thoughts?
I'm just honestly, I'm not surprised at all that this guy was an illegal alien. I think it just kind of goes back to further reinforce other points made by Trump and other conservative politicians that as we leave the border open, we're just importing crime. Like this never would have happened if we would have had a border wall and actually enforced the laws that are already on the books.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing is you're right. And that transitions to my spicy take that I put on Telegram, which is that the real way to stop like these child rapes from happening is to stop illegal immigration. And as much as that may offend anyone, I think that it's a lot less satanic for me to say stop letting in foreign people into this country who have a higher crime rate that then start raping our people, as opposed to saying what the media is saying, which is this is why we need abortion. Keep letting rapists into this country to rape our people, but then make sure the American people can abort their own children afterwards. That to me is the most satanic thing, to advocate for child murder. My position is let's just keep people out of the country, because I hate to say it, but the rape rate, especially of children, and the child abuse rates of people outside of America, usually a lot higher, especially in these Central American countries where the crime rates are incredibly high. They're even higher than in Africa, in places where you would think with even more corruption in government, the crime rates would be higher. But no, we're talking at levels sometimes 50 to 100 times higher in their murder rates in these Central American countries. We have to build a wall and stop immigration.
Yeah, exactly. And the way I look at it is like any crime is committed by an illegal alien is a crime that didn't have to occur to begin with.
Exactly.
That if we would just enforce our laws and enforce the border, we wouldn't be dealing with this crisis. But instead, we're doing the opposite. Instead, we're creating a draw where more and more people are coming up. There is a video I saw earlier with this huge convoy crossing the river, and there's no border patrol to be seen. And actually, like border patrol is like running at a deficit right now. Like because everything's been so bad, and because we're encouraging more and more people to come, there's something like $340 billion over budget already for the year.
Jeez.
And there's still months left to go.
It's insane. Well, yeah, we need to like double, triple, quadruple Border Patrol's budget, and we got to build a wall. Like this is the one thing. Like I don't like taxes, but if I have to have my tax money go to anything, it would not even be like police and military as much as Border Patrol at this point. I think that is the number one priority where tax money needs to be going above all else, because there is an invasion happening. There are foreign peoples who hate our country, who are killing our people, who are entering into our land. The things that are happening in America today, the mass demographic shifts that are happening in the US, are things that in the past you would have to go to war with a country and destroy their government in order to do. And yet our government, because of how parasitic they are, have done this themselves, opened up our borders and allowed post-war conditions, post-losers of war conditions in our nation, simply because they can benefit from it. And yet we, the American people, are the ones who are hurt from it.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know what it's going to take to get the federal government to make some changes, but look at how much money we've dumped into Ukraine, and they're wanting another $750 billion, almost $1 trillion to rebuild, even though Russia's still in there bombing them. But and to fix the border wall, even if we go with the high estimate of $8.5 billion, it could be as low as $4 billion to complete a border wall. Like to me, that seems like it's an investment worth making.
Yeah, that's like nothing compared to the federal budget.
Exactly. And then also going back to policies that actually make sense, whether it's the Remain in Mexico policy or even just automatic deportation, anybody that violates the rules, even if you want to go with the international standards of if you're leaving your country claiming asylum, you have to go to the first country that would grant you asylum.
Right.
and just no trials, no anything. If you're caught illegally crossing the border, you just
Yeah.
ship them back.
Exactly.
And then stop encouraging this other stuff. Or I don't know. It's a problem that seems too easy to solve. That instead we're finding reasons not to solve it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's because the people who control this country have an interest in it. They have an interest on an economic level, on a social level, and this is why I've always said it's both Democrats and Republicans who work together on the issue of immigration to further benefit themselves, because the Republicans want to make sure their donors are happy, the big businesses who want cheap labor, and the Democrats want a lot of new voters, and immigrants vote overwhelmingly, upwards of 70% for the Democratic Party. So, of course, both parties are now interested in allowing mass migration into this country. The only difference is Republicans will say, well, let's do this legally. And then the Democrats will say, let's do it legally and illegally, too. And then the Republicans go and advocate for amnesty like Marco Rubio did, like Reagan did, like all these conservative icons we have. They advocate anyways for amnesty for the illegals in the future anyways. So, or take the Dreamers as well. How many Republicans were on board for protecting Dreamers? The reality is that no matter how much people tug on your heartstrings, no matter how great of a story that they come up with, no matter how emotionally invested you may be in any of these particular cases, at the end of the day, America needs to be for Americans. And we have no obligation to any people outside of this country in the same way that Russia has no obligation to take in Guatemalan immigrants. We don't have any obligation either. Neither does China, neither does Israel, neither does France or Germany or England. But apparently, we have to make an exception for our own country and think, well, America is actually the savior of the world. And we just have to have refugees taken into this country. We just have to have asylum claims be made to get into this country. I think it's totally acceptable to say we should have zero, not a single person come to this country. I don't take that position myself, but I think that's totally reasonable because America should be for Americans, not for people of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Like in the past, we have had times in our history where we've clamped down, either had allowed zero immigration or close to it.
Right.
So returning to that again until people can assimilate seemed like a good idea to me, and also to clean out all the illegal aliens that are here and prosecute the companies that are hiring them and otherwise violating the law.
Amen. You got my vote. I love hearing that. That's beautiful.
Well, I mean, that's really like if you remove the incentives for people to come, like you start prosecuting employers that hire them, or confiscating wire transactions that are leaving the U.S. with our money. Like that's another one that I would do. Like, is put a 50% tax on any money on a wire transfer that's leaving the country and not going. It's not like a corporation shifting money to their overseas branch.
Yeah, amen. I heard something, I don't know if this number is accurate, so don't quote me on this, but something like 25% or something of Mexico's economy is like US dollars going into Mexico. Maybe it's not that high, but it is like is based on Mexicans living in the US sending money from the US into Mexico. Because something like 1 in 5 Mexicans on the planet live in America, right?
Yeah.
28% of Mexico's population is in America, which just blows my mind.
Yeah, I think you're pretty close. I think it's around 20% of their country's GDP comes from remittance from foreign workers. And I think it's, so it's close. I wrote a giant paper on this years ago when I was in college, but, and then I think it's the percentage of the, like the 1 in 5, it isn't just in the US, they've left the country for work, which tells me, your country is not able to provide what it needs.
Right. And I would assume most of it is from the US.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
But
and also who is it? Barbados Slim, is that his name?
No, that's the guy from Futurama.
I always Carlos
Slim.
His company is like it's a Mexican telephone company he owns, and he's one of the richest men in Mexico. But like the vast majority of his money comes from his Mexican customers who live in the US, and he like upcharges them all these insane fees. I believe he actually bought the New York Times or something as well, and now they're profusely pro-immigration. They love immigration. Before they were more neutral. Now they're extremely left-wing, especially on the topic of immigration, which is kind of funny how that worked out.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, Bezos buying the Washington Times. All of a sudden now they're very pro-Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember there was an article. Is it Huffington Post that he owns?
I think Bezos owns the Washington Times.
Washington Times. It may be. They're all the same to me again. It's basically, like the non-American countries are all Mexico to me. The non-liberal or the non-conservative newspapers are all like New York Times to me. But I saw this article written in Jeff Bezos' paper before he owned it. and it was like Amazon's treating its workers poorly and they're not getting paid enough. And there's some horror stories about Amazon fulfillment factories that we should get into, because it's very
Yeah.
interesting how bad he is of an employee or an employer. But then after Amazon buys the newspaper, or Jeff Bezos buys the newspaper, all of a sudden they're printing articles like, Jeff Bezos is an amazing boss and Amazon is super environmentally friendly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why you buy the newspaper. It's for the advertising, not necessarily for selling advertising, for, it's advertising how wonderful your other operations are, especially as you try to spread throughout the country. So, I mean, there's been an incredible number of like Amazon fulfillment centers that have gone up nationwide, as they offer like, same day delivery, next day delivery. All these things take manpower.
Oh, yeah.
And it does hurt a lot of other businesses in the area when they come in. One of the things that I came from the staffing world before this, and in a few different cities that I've run offices in, once Amazon opens up, they can afford to pay entry-level wages way above what other companies can.
Right.
And that ends up forcing a lot of small, like mom and pop places to close, because they can't afford to pay $21, $22 an hour for somebody to go, grab a box off a shelf and scan it.
Right, exactly. Well, and also like the workers, and I don't know if they've improved things since, but they used to just treat their employees terrible at these fulfillment centers where, for example, the law states you only need like one restroom per factory, but the Amazon factories are 10 miles long, some of them, like they're huge. So factory workers would literally have to either, they couldn't get to the bathroom and back in time for their break. That was only like 10 minutes per shift or whatever. Or it was like too far away that they literally just could not even walk all that distance. So they were having to like pee in bottles on the workplace factory floor. And these are types of things that we hear about in like China, where women are like giving birth on the floors of factory and having to pee on the ground and stuff, or pee in buckets. And this stuff is beginning to happen in America, and no one bats an eye because, well, Jeff Bezos and Amazon hired a new gay transgender CEO, and they're super environmentally friendly with their new slim boxes that they use. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's the same thing we always see. We ignore these things here, or we ignore other like labor conditions in China, so you can get your iPhone or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
The activists will be out there, but only until it hurts one of the big tech companies or Amazon or whoever else.
Exactly. It's so shameful that these companies have tapped into this like leftist mentality where, before, like Occupy Wall Street was made up of all these young liberal kids. And, I think we kind of took advantage of the fact that all these young, youthful, energetic people were all these leftists, because now they're being used against the right wing and being used by these companies to further these companies' agendas, which are against the middle class Americans' interest, right? I mean, a perfect example of this is they have, there was Occupy Wall Street, and they were protesting, I believe it was Chase Bank and JP Morgan, right? And then a few years later, just within 10 years, that bank, Chase, started giving all this money to the LGBT and to environmental causes and such. So then 10 years later, the exact same street, Wall Street or whatever, there was a pride parade sponsored by Chase, and all the progressives were dancing around, loving the bank. The bank hasn't changed at all. If anything, they're more ruthless than they've ever been before. But yet all these progressives who normally would have protested them and actually had tried to make some change are now on their side.
Yeah. Well, I think Occupy in general got co-opted because, initially it was a lot of people on the right and the left uniting against these big banks and big corporations that harm our country. Yeah. Well, initially it was, but the left was organized, and they pushed out the right-wing people that were there that didn't want to get involved with some of the other like social issue and other garbage that was going on. There was no organization on the right. And at some point the conservatives tend to have jobs and have to go back to them. They're not a bunch of other trust fund kids. But
that's what I mean. I think we took advantage of the trust fund kids. Like at first they were actually fighting against like these banks and stuff, which like back in the day when I'm like a libertarian or whatever, I'm like, oh, but the banks are good. Now I realize like the banks are actually really harmful in the way that they operate today to middle-class Americans. And they're actually very predatory when they go to your grandma's house trying to sell her a second mortgage or whatever. And then they lose all of her money. And then they get the taxpayers to bail them out because they made bad financial decisions. Like time after time after time, they have just crippled the American economy and the middle class in the US, whether it's through debt or high interest rates or predatory lending practices or all of these things. So, that's what I was trying to say. Like, I think we took advantage of the trust fund kids who were fighting against these people. And we just kind of thought, oh, they're young and dumb. Who cares? They need to get a job. But now I'm kind of like, guys, can you come back and start fighting against the banks again instead of blowing churches up?
Yeah, burning down buildings and threatening Supreme Court justices. But yeah, I think that the movement was co-opted, because I think what the Uniparty in Washington really fears is the right and the left actually getting together on some of these things, where even if it's for different reasons, but it's the same end goal. It's, we want real regulations on these banks. We don't want them bailed out over everything. Right. And we're tired of printing money and inflation. But if you can co-opt that and instead get the left focused on these meaningless social issues like pronouns and all that, then they'll stay away from people on the right. But if we get together, things will have to change in Washington.
That's why they're doing it. This is all manufactured outrage over pronouns and transgenderism and drag queens and stuff. All of that is just designed by like you said, the Uniparty in Washington to distract people from what they're actually trying to do. Or at least certainly with the Democrats, this is what they're doing, is they're like, hey, everyone, look at pronouns, fight over pronouns, everyone. And then they can do all their satanic rituals. Like, do you think Hunter Biden actually gives a crap about what pronouns people use? He was buying woman. He was buying woman like property. And, then in the same breath, he'll say, oh, pronouns are really important, everyone. Oh, yeah, I stand for the Democrats. It's ridiculous, but that's the reason they're doing it. They want us fighting over this issue over here that's meaningless so that they can do the actual meaningful work behind the scenes without any criticism.
Well, I mean, if the left didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have standards at all.
Exactly.
So yes, they'll do whatever they want in their free time, and then if they get caught, they'll come out and make some little apology, and that'll be the media will tell us that's acceptable. Whereas you have somebody on the right do something, even if it's a minor transgression, it's a big deal. It's broadcast for the next 24 hours.
Perfect example of that was that what was his name, Garner, who did the ad, the rhino hunting ad.
Oh yeah. Eric Greitens.
Yeah. And he was investigated by the FBI and had his guns taken or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah. Now that was not due to the ad, but it suddenly happens once he runs the ad.
Right. Well, kind of suspicious timing there. But then you have someone like AOC, when they're criticized, there is no, and not that she should be criminally prosecuted for being like a socialist. But, in American law, she shouldn't be persecuted or prosecuted for anything. But, when she is criticized for anything, whenever she comes under any fire, what does she do? Does she take responsibility? Does she apologize? No, she pivots and will say things like, you just want to date me. Isn't that what she said to, who was it? Michael Knowles,
who was it?
Or Ben Shapiro or Dan Crenshaw? Which one
I
of these
can't remember who it was now. Oh man, that's gonna bother me.
That's what they do. They don't even apologize. They pivot and make themselves the victim again or something like that, or make themselves so much better than you. It's one of the two. They can never just be a human being and say, oh yeah, I was wrong about that, and move on.
Well, exactly. And then when somebody does throw it back in their face, like Elon Musk to AOC,
right?
Then all of a sudden he's a sexist for using her line,
that's
throwing it back at her.
It's like they're either above you or below you. They're either the victim or they're just better than you. And there's no in between. So it's like, oh, AOC's like, I'm better than you. I don't want to date you, you scummy little person. And then when someone says that to her, she's like, oh, how dare you be sexist? And she's the eternal victim.
Yeah. Well, and that's the real game. And two, when there is illegal activity, like I know AOC's had some campaign finance issues, and she owes taxes from 5 years ago. She still hasn't paid.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah,
not that it would be that much because she was a bartender, but
yeah, true. But yeah, still back taxes. She can't follow the rules that she makes for everybody else, but then we're just supposed to ignore that.
Yeah, exactly. And well, I mean, and she was I remember too, speaking of her being a bartender, didn't she say something like she couldn't afford to pay rent until she got her job as a congresswoman or something?
I think so. I think that
she was
her.
I finally she got her first paycheck. This was back in whatever it was, 2018 or 2016. She's like, I finally have enough to pay for my apartment rent. And she just got elected to Congress. People like, you, how did that work before? Were you just not paying rent or something? No wonder you're a socialist.
Yeah, I guess. Who let her stay in the building for that long? Normally, if you don't pay your rent in 30 days, they usually file for eviction. But I don't know. No. New York might have crazy rules on that.
I was just thinking that. I don't know. But speaking of crazy rules and high prices of things, we have Joe Biden, of course, with the still rising inflation. I heard the press secretary say prices of gas are going down. Is that true?
If they are, we're talking fractions.
Right.
I mean, technically, around where I live, the price is down slightly from where it was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was as high as $5.40 for a little while, and I think we're sitting. Yeah, I think we're sitting a little over $5 a gallon around here.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, it went down like 10 or 20 cents or whatever, but after going up like $2, right? So it
Yeah.
has gone down. But I think like the point I was trying to make there was like, even if gas is going down, like they're claiming this is a major victory. And it is nice to have cheaper gas by, even if it is by a small margin. But the rest of everything else is still going up in cost. I mean, inflation is still rising, is it not?
Well, yeah, and even then, like, okay, so gas going down by 20 cents when it just more than doubled from where it was
Right.
when Biden was inaugurated.
Yeah. It went up like $2, $3. Like it went up a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Like, I think the average was like around 2.20 per gallon when
Oh wow.
Biden was sworn in. So yeah, we're up close to $3 a gallon from where it was. So yeah,
Jeez.
I'm happy to get the 20 cents back. I mean, that'll save me a whole 340 if I ever have to like fill my SUV up all the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't really offset the cost more than doubling.
Right. Yeah, of course. And like I said, inflation in all other areas seems to just be continuing to go up as well, right?
Oh yeah, it's nuts. It's the highest level it's been in 41 years. Like Biden, I'll give him this. He's broken a lot of records as president, but they're not good records to break.
That's like, yeah, I saw that one post where it's like, Donald Trump was in office 4 years and never ended abortion. But Biden was in office for 2 years and it ended under him or whatever. It's like,
Yes.
there you go, Biden. You got it. Same. We're making new records here. Record high numbers of inflation. Record high numbers of gas prices.
Yeah, record illegal immigration.
Yeah,
record
exactly.
record crime, record homicides in New York and Chicago.
Yeah.
He's setting a lot of records we don't want to set, but well, maybe he
reminds-
does want to set them.
There was like this speech Milo was giving, and he was like, America is now #1, or like Sweden is now #1 in rape. And then someone's like, yeah, let's go, #1. Yeah, don't laugh about that.
But yeah, like groceries are up 12%, gas has increased 60%, electricity's up 14%, rent 5.8, which is probably higher. Cost of chicken has risen 19%. But it's like when all these things add up together, because a lot of these are necessities for households, and when income's flat or even decreasing, U.S. workers due to inflation have lost $3,400 in annual wages due to inflation. So their purchasing power has dropped. Plus, since it's costing them more, is basically they've gone backwards $3,400 just since he was allegedly elected.
Yeah, and the middle class, of course, is getting crushed as always. And that's really what it's always about, is that the upper class benefits when the middle class is in decay. Because what's happening is, people will mock the left wingers for talking about economic inequality. But really what the issue is a shrinking middle class. Because if you are in the middle class and the middle class is going away and it's squeezing you out, you are either going to be in the upper class. So if you're making millions of dollars, congratulations, you're going to be making many millions more. But if you're not making millions of dollars starting today, you're most likely moving down into the lower class, where you're going to have less money and you're going to have less property and you're going to own nothing and you're not going to be happy, so that you can work as a slave class just to get by to the people who do have money, right? So it's not about like, oh, it's immoral that there's different people have different income levels. It's purely like a practical argument that as the middle class shrinks, you're either going to move up or down the socioeconomic ladder. And you don't want to be moving down it. I think every American can be on board with the idea that we don't want to become more poor than we even are today. But that's what's happening.
Yeah, and when Trump was in office, it was actually the time in our history where we had the most new millionaires generated out of the middle class. You had more people moving up into the upper class and upper middle class than any previous point in U.S. history. So we forget about that. And what's interesting, too, is the media would still run stories as shrinking middle class under Trump, but it was shrinking for good reasons, because people are moving up, starting new businesses, and there's less poor.
Right.
But anyway, it's another interesting observation here before we move on to our next story. In cities, the inflation is even worse, as high as 10%. They looked at 7 major cities that were each saw an additional 10% to added costs due to inflation. And this is due to increased fuel costs. It's costing more to get things on the shelves. And also in cities, it's costing them even more just to get people to go to work because of all this, incentivized laziness.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, the economy is definitely headed in a rough direction here, and Biden's not helping. And I think we have even more news on Biden here as well.
Yeah. So the Biden administration is kind of behind the scenes threatening pharmacists right now that are refusing or may not prescribe these abortion drugs.
Whoa.
Yeah. So this is primarily targeted at states that either already had trigger laws in a place or states like Ohio and a few others that are about to put things like this into place to ban abortion or ban it except for cases of rape and incest.
Jeez. Yeah, well, that's obviously terrible. And I mean, I think we spoke yesterday about the fact that the feds, or 2 days ago rather, I think we spoke about how the feds could try to pass a federal law in regards to abortion that would basically just reenact essentially what Roe versus Wade was, if they can get federal justification for allowing abortion. And if they're not going to do that, they're going to do things like this, where they coerce, pharmaceutical companies to, give out abortion pills in every state.
Yeah, they're directly targeting pharmacists and their licenses.
Wow.
Because a lot of these things, like for example, you have a light. Well, actually, no, I almost misspoke. It was doctors that have a DEA license, DEA number to write prescriptions for like painkillers, that kind of thing. But I imagine pharmacists probably have something similar, some sort of certification to be able to dispense different drugs.
Yeah, I would think so. So they're going after individual people, though, not just the industry at large.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So you target the person that's behind the counter, gathering your prescription or mixing it, depending on what it is. And that way the individual, because they know they'll get through that way, there'll be some people that'll just go along with it because that's their opinion anyway, and other people will because they're threatened. You're threatening their livelihood and their license.
It's terrible. Yeah, well, it's like, again, I was thinking about this just the other day, how the government, they can be very sneaky about how they do things. So for example, what was it? I think like I was listening to some book from some communist or whatever, and their plans on how they're going to
some communist book, whatever.
Yeah. Not because I'm a communist, because I like studying my enemies.
Yeah.
But they were going through like the 10 points of communism, and some of them were like, oh, have like an interest-based system, eliminate private property. And I was thinking to myself, well, eliminate private property, that would never happen in the US, where you go and you seize people's like homes and you take them and all these things. But I was thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, the way that they can abolish private property doesn't mean they go and kill everyone with private property. That can be done by making it just totally unaffordable to ever own property. If they could do it, like they set up the economy in a way in which you'll own nothing and be happy, and that would achieve the exact same result of no one owning property. But they do it over a very long time and very slowly and very methodically, that the American people don't realize, oh my gosh, like we're heading towards a like one world government when we keep slowly inching away our rights here.
Yeah.
And people think like, the libertarians will be like, well, I have guns and I have, I own my house, so everything's okay. Yeah, but what about in 50 years when the housing market's unaffordable? Oh, well, I still own my house. What if property tax goes up like 300% and you lose your job, and then the government takes your home, totally legally speaking, and totally within the parameters of the Constitution and everything, theoretically at least. So then you still lose your private property and you have nothing to show for it. And this whole time, you've never been taking any steps to try to avoid that, because you've thought, well, I own my house and I have my guns and I have my free speech, so I'm okay. But then meanwhile, you get censored by tech companies. You get your guns taken through red flag gun laws or something. And then you have your property taken through property tax or other means. And then you can't buy one because the economy is so messed up.
Yeah, well, that is a battle I think we should be picking up as conservatives once we get some of these other things under control, is eliminating property tax.
Yeah.
Or at least capping it. Maybe you pay it for the first 10 years you're at a home, because it just, in the reality, it just turns us all into serfs. At the end of the day, you're always 100%. Having to pay the government the fee to use your land.
Yeah.
And there's no escaping it.
And that should be the number one thing, like that there should not be tax on. Because like income or what, like all of it is, you can make a strong argument for any tax, like, the government doesn't deserve your labor. They don't deserve, a portion of your sales or whatever. But I think more than anything, your right to property is even more important than your right to labor or your right to, buy things. I think your right to own property is like the cornerstone of all things. Your right to own a possession. Because think about it, with labor, it's an ongoing thing you constantly do, and everyone accepts that. With sales and buying things, it's like an ongoing thing. You always buy something every day or every month or whatever. But with land, you should only have to buy land once and it's yours permanently. And like you said, we are made into serfs when the government demands constant payments as if it's like rent to a property the government owns. So that should be, in my opinion, property tax is like the most immoral tax there is, because it's not allowing you to own a possession like land, which is the most valuable asset you have.
Yeah, I mean, I do realize there are a few exceptions to this with like automotive, like that some states do have a reoccurring tax on a vehicle.
Really?
But by and large, yeah, I think it's only a handful that do that like every so many years or every year. That's part of your registration fee.
Well, yeah, what about registration fees and all these other things too, right?
Well, any other item you buy, it's a one-time sales tax. You know,
Yeah.
you go buy stuff at the store, and even if it's split up between a county and the state and whatever,
Yeah.
you only pay a tax on it one time.
Great
Whereas
point.
your home or a vehicle, in some cases, you're paying a continuous tax just for owning the item.
Yeah, well, and you know why? Because your home is the most valuable asset that normal people afford, and the number one indication of social mobility in the middle class is home ownership. The second most valuable asset that most people have is their vehicle. So, of course, these are the two things that the government wants to latch onto and say, we technically own this if you don't make the payments that we demand you make.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't pay us our money, then men with guns will show up to take you to jail or kill you.
Exactly. And it's like, again, I'm not like a libertarian or anything. I do think they have good arguments when it comes to this stuff, but I believe more in the necessary evil type of taxation idea. But when it comes to property ownership, I think that's something that should be valued more than the extra bit of revenue that states get. And I think I would 100% take a 20% sales tax over no property tax or over having property tax. You know what I mean? If they increase sales tax by twice as much because they're getting rid of property tax, I would take that any day of the week.
Yeah, it used to be for a while. There was the national sales tax idea that Neil Bortz put out, and even Herman Cain adopted during his presidential run, the 999 plan to shift us over to a national sales tax. And really, I think that's where we should be anyway. That your income ought to be tax free, your savings, your home, everything
As
else.
opposed to income tax, they would have sales tax. You mean?
Yeah, so we'd have about a 20% sales tax nationwide. I think it was 19%. Certain items would be exempt, medical and food, but otherwise, your money's yours when you're paid. So if you want to sink it into your property or save it or retire early or whatever, they just don't get their cut. So if you're frugal and you spend your money wisely or you buy used goods, you're not paying a sales tax on it.
Yeah, and that way you don't have to, like, there's the inequity too of like someone who's not lazy and actually works hard. The government takes your money. If you work overtime, they take even more. If you work really hard and get a bonus, they take even more. Right. So, and then there's like these lazy bums who get welfare, and then, they can go buy stuff at no sales tax in some states, which, again, I'm not saying like we need lots more tax for everyone, but it is kind of, it's kind of bad that some homeless guy who's lazy gets away with doing less work and contributing less than you. You contribute, and then they want more from you. That guy doesn't contribute anything, and they don't expect anything.
Well, it's even worse than that. We actually incentivize the bad behavior in the federal tax system. Like 49% of people pay zero income tax, or we actually pay rebates to that they didn't earn it. And there's a combination like child tax credits, earned income credit, and other things. But we end up subsidizing a huge portion of the population with our taxes, while we penalize people that are successful or have worked hard to earn what they have. I mean, the left likes to play this game to like any person that's wealthy somehow stole it from other people. But in reality, most people are self-made. Most people have moved up from a lower station in life to become millionaires, or they've started a business or done something else to earn this position. It isn't usually inherited wealth.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I think that the most important people to protect in this country are people who own small businesses and those middle class people who are trying to move up the ladder there. And I do think, I have said in the past, the tax rate for Bill Gates should be 100%, not because I think it's moral to tax anyone at 100%, but because I don't like Bill Gates. And him having money is causing harm to America. And if we take his money, there will be less harm to America done. So just on like a very statistic level, it seems like a net benefit that this guy has no money to push all of these terrible things on the US that he's pushing. It's more of a morality argument than an economic one. But for these ultra mega billionaires who are harming America, and not all of them are, some of them are good and, keep your money, like Elon, keep your money, go buy Twitter. But for people like Bezos and Gates and Soros, America would be objectively better if these people were like either put in prison, or even if we just took their money and then, keep like $10 million, go live in a mansion, but we're taking all the rest that you use to donate to Black Lives Matter and Antifa and other terrorist groups.
Yeah. I wonder if we could just play the same game the government does now and then change the rules with it. We'll write a law that we know is unconstitutional that only targets these people.
Exactly.
Take everything they have, and then they have nothing to fight it in court with.
Exactly. Well, and that's what the left does to us constantly, all the time. And we don't. The thing is like we will never play their game, which is why we're losing, because they're willing to fight us. We're trying to bring like our fists to a gunfight. The left is like, I'm going to shoot you. And you're like, oh, well, shooting people's wrong. Maybe we'll have a gentleman's duel. And then they shoot you in the head and you're dead. And it's like, why didn't you go grab like your big shotgun to fight that leftist with the handgun? Instead, you wanted to have a gentleman's duel with your fists. And then you just got shot and killed, metaphorically.
Yeah. Or literally sometimes in some of these cities now.
Well, Yeah, exactly. And I was trying to think of a good transition out, but well, we have on this, we already covered this story, but I think that's about all the time we have today. So thank you for joining us on Punching Left. We hope that you don't get shot in the head metaphorically or literally
Or
from a
literally, yeah.
leftist. And you can find us on all other platforms at punchingleft.com. Please subscribe to our Telegram channel. We announce announcements there. We also say when we upload videos, and we have other posts, sometimes clips from the shows. So please do join us on there. We also have other projects in the work like the LBF Show, lbfshow.com. It's Let's Be Frank. You can find us at letsbefrank.tv or lbfshow.com. That is a show we're doing on Mike Lindell's TV network. You can find it on frankspeech.com. It is live every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Am I correct about that, or 7 Central?
7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, we'll be on this Sunday with Annie Cyrus. We'll have a good show for you guys. And the big plus with one of the big pluses with this show on Lindell TV with Let's Be Frank is we don't have to operate under the same constraints that we do here on YouTube. So there are some stories that we've intentionally skipped, like a lot of these developments with the J6 committee and a few other ones that we'll be covering this weekend that if we covered here, we'd get nuked off YouTube.
J6, vaccines, election,
yes,
things that happened, Big Buddha Latina, AOC. There's going to be some topics that we can't discuss on YouTube that will be covered over on Let's Be Frank because we're shielded from censorship on Mike Lindell's network. So please join us over there on Sundays. And again, subscribe to our Telegram channel where you can find all this information at punchingleft.com. Thank you guys so much for joining today. God bless each and every one of you guys, and take care.
Yeah, thanks again. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to support this show and our other work, you can go to MyPillow or my store, use code AC21 for a discount up to 66%. And you'll be helping Mike Lindell, Frank's Speech, and helping make sure that we can continue to get our message out. So thanks again, and we'll see everybody soon.